Welcome to Folklore, where ancient traditions are never truly buried, where whispers echo louder than screams, and where belief is the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. Tonight, we take you to the forgotten village of Tanjung Merah, a place swallowed by jungle, silence, and secrets. Buried beneath its crumbling earth lies a drum, not a drum of celebration, but one carved to call the dead. It was once played under eclipsed moons, when blood met rice and silver paper turned to ash, in a ritual meant to bind ancestral spirits into guardians. But betrayal rotted the rhythm. A shaman changed the beat, and something else answered. Something older than the ancestors, something feral, hungry. Generations have passed, but the curse still hums in the soil, and those born of the bloodline can still hear the rhythm in their sleep. This is the drum that calls the dead. And once you hear its beat, you'll never unhear it again. The road to Tanjung Merah was more memory than map. Twisting through dense teak forest, it narrowed until even the jungle seemed reluctant to allow passage. Vines reached like fingers, roots curled like warning signs. The deeper they drove, the more the air thickened, hot, wet, and heavy, as if something unseen was breathing just behind the trees. Artie kept her eyes fixed on the fading dirt track ahead, trying not to flinch as their van scraped against overgrown branches. She sat in the front passenger seat, a folder of notes resting on her lap. Handwritten interviews, copied maps, and a photocopy of a newspaper clipping from 1912 that had started all of this. Wedding party vanishes during eclipsed night. Bride never found. No bodies, no survivors, only a drum, blood-stained, and a bridal headdress made of human hair. Artie's fingers traced the edge of the article for the 100th time, but the ink no longer bled questions. She had memorized every word, every name, including the bride's. Kartika Ayu, a name carved into her family tree, her great-great-grandmother's cousin, vanished during a forbidden ritual that scholars only whispered about, ritual of the 9th night. Syncretic, they said, Taoist influence buried under layers of Javanese mysticism, too impure to study, too dangerous to revive. And yet, here Artie was. "You okay?" whispered Bayu from behind the wheel, pulling her back to the present. His grip on the steering wheel was not light. "You've been staring at that paper like it's gonna talk back." Artie managed a dry smile. "If it starts singing, we turn around." In the back seat, Mei Lin snorted. "Only if it sings in key." She was adjusting the lenses on her documentary rig, checking the battery for the 5th time. Behind her, Arya, sound tech, occasional skeptic, and Mei Lin's partner, was mumbling to himself about needing more gaffer tape. It was a small crew, just 4 of them, graduate students, half funded and half mad to be here. The university had approved Artie's thesis proposal, an ethnomusicological reconstruction of the 9th night ritual in pre-colonial Java, with asterisks. Fieldwork at your own risk. No liability for cultural sensitivities. Avoid spiritual trespass. Do not play the rhythm. That was written in the margin of an old Dutch missionary journal she found in the archives. An underlined warning, no explanation. They arrived at the village by dusk. Tanjung Merah looked like it had been carved into the jungle and then forgotten. Homes stood on sagging stilts, their woven bamboo walls bowed inward as if trying to inhale themselves. Smoke rose in thin columns from a few stubborn kitchens, but no one stood to greet the outsiders. No children played, no roosters crowed, just the sound of cicadas and a distant steady dripping, as though the forest itself was weeping. Artie stepped out of the van, her boots sinking slightly into the damp red soil. She inhaled slowly, hoping for the scent of something familiar: clove, rice, smoke. Instead, she smelled rust, wet earth, and something faintly metallic, like old coins soaked in blood. Bayou was already unloading their gear when a voice called out, "You shouldn't be here." The village elder stood barefoot beneath a tree that leaned like a crooked shoulder over the path. His sarong was faded, his shirt open to the chest. Wrinkles etched his skin like carvings on old wood. But his eyes were sharp. "The road doesn't bring people here anymore. It only takes them away." Artie bowed her head respectfully. "Pak Darsan?" He nodded once, slow and cautious. "I'm Artie. I sent letters. I'm here about—" "You're here about the drum." Silence pressed in like fog. Behind her, Meilin froze mid-shot. Arya stopped winding the cable. Bayou set down a speaker with exaggerated care. "The Bedug Arwah is not a story. It's a lock, and some locks are not meant to open." Artie swallowed. "I'm not here to open anything, just to listen, record, understand." The elder tilted his head. "Understand? Then you must first understand this. That drum does not call the dead like you call a dog. It binds them, forces them, chains them to our world. And when it is played without the right blood, the wrong spirits answer." "I am of that blood," Artie said softly. She didn't mean to say it out loud, but it came out like a confession. The elder looked at her long and hard, then finally sighed. "Then you already know what you've come to hear. You heard it in your sleep, didn't you?" Artie's stomach turned to stone. She nodded. "A rhythm with no melody, a beat behind your eyes." She had heard it since she was a child, in dreams, in fevers, a slow, pulsing beat. 3 strokes, pause, then 2. It wasn't music, it was a knock, a call, a warning. The elder stepped aside, motioning them to enter the village. "You can stay in the teacher's house. It's been empty since the rains. Don't eat after midnight. Don't sleep with your back to the forest. And whatever you do, don't follow the sound if you hear it at night." The house was crooked and damp, but large enough to sleep 4. Artie claimed the small back room, a window facing the jungle. Meilin and Arya took the central space. Bayou strung up mosquito nets like it was war prep. As night fell, the jungle came alive, not with animal sounds, but with whispers. Leaves rustled without wind. Bamboo creaked without weight. The air felt crowded. Artie sat cross-legged, flipping through her notes by flashlight. Every recorded account of the 9th night ritual led back here, to Tanjung Merah, to that vanished wedding, to the eclipse. The ritual had elements from Taoist night offerings fused with local animism. Offerings of blood-soaked rice, silver joss paper burned in moonlight. Gamelan instruments played in a hypnotic rhythm meant to lull the dead. But one instrument was always mentioned last, and only once: the Bedug Arwah, the drum of souls. It was never described in detail, only hinted at. Must not be played alone, cannot be tuned by mortal ears. Must be buried between the 9th and 10th night, else the rhythm escapes. What did that mean? Her hand brushed the old headdress photo beside her. A bridal crown, braided strands of black hair twisted with thread, some strands gray, some still red at the root. 3 generations of women woven into one. It was said the bride wore it on the night she vanished. Said she danced before the drum. Said her mouth was sewn shut with ritual thread, so she could not speak the spirits' names aloud. Outside, something moved. Not the wind, not a bird. A step. Artie froze. Then came a second step. Then a third, soft, deliberate. She turned off the flashlight. Silence. She moved to the window slowly and peered out. Only jungle, mist curling through trees. But in the distance, almost too soft to be real, she heard it. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. The rhythm from her dreams. It wasn't imagined. It was here. Calling. The villagers did not speak of the pavilion. They did not point to it. They did not name it. They did not glance in its direction when the wind stirred the trees. But it was there, buried behind a curtain of banyan roots and tall grass, like a wound the forest refused to heal. Artie found it the next morning. She had followed a faded footpath through damp ferns and crooked trees, guided by a line of broken stones barely peeking through the moss. The jungle was quiet, unnaturally so. Even the cicadas held their breath here. She stopped when she saw it. A collapsed wooden frame, sun-bleached and rotting, barely clinging to its foundation stones. What remained of the roof sagged into itself like a throat mid-swallow. One column still stood, wrapped in the strangling grip of fig vines. Etched into its base were strange markings, scratched deep and blackened with age. Bayou caught up to her, panting, a machete still in hand. "We're not supposed to be here," he said, voice low. Artie didn't answer. She stepped forward slowly, brushing vines aside. "This was it," she whispered. "This was the pavilion where they held the ritual." Bayou frowned. "Doesn't look like much." But she could feel it, the way the soil sunk beneath her steps, the way the air thickened, humid and metallic, the way her ears rang, not from pressure, but like something distant was humming, a low vibration, almost a murmur. She knelt by the stone foundation, running her fingers along the carvings. Not Javanese script, not Chinese either, something older, something half erased. Mei Lin arrived next, camera slung over her shoulder. "You found it," she said, then paused. "This place feels weird, like my lens is fogging, but it's not." Arya followed close behind, eyes narrowed. "You smell that?" They did. A faint odor of burnt rice, sweet and bitter, mixed with iron. "Someone's been here recently," Arya muttered. "This isn't just decay." Artie stood and moved carefully toward the center of the ruins. The floor had mostly collapsed, revealing a shallow pit choked with vines and rotted beams. At the center of the depression, half buried under dirt and twisted roots, lay something massive and round. It was darker than the soil, too smooth to be rock. "The drum," Artie breathed. "It's still here." The Bedug Arwah. No larger than a table, but the weight of it pressed on the air. The top surface, once taut leather, had caved in, but streaks of dried black still ran down its sides. Not rot, not paint, stains. Artie reached toward it, hand trembling. Bayou grabbed her wrist. "No, not yet." She looked at him, startled. His expression was unreadable, cautious, protective. "We don't touch it, not until we know how." "Do you believe it?" Mei Lin asked, voice quieter now. Bayu hesitated. "I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in history, and this drum has too much of it." Artie slowly lowered her hand. She crouched by the rim, examining the strange nails driven into its edge. Not metal, bone, perhaps, or horn. Each one engraved with crude symbols. She pulled out her notebook and sketched quickly, as Mei Lin adjusted her camera and began filming. "This was where the 9th night was held," Artie explained softly to the camera. "According to fragmented records, the bride would dance here before the drum as her family played the gamelan around her. Offerings were made, blood-soaked rice in banana leaves, silver joss paper burned in iron bowls. The air had to be perfectly still, the sound perfectly pure." She paused, looking again at the shattered drum. "And then the rhythm began. 3 beats, pause, 2, played only once every 9 years, under the eclipse." Arya looked uncomfortable. He was scanning the trees, eyes flicking left and right. "How do you even know this stuff? It's not in any book." "It's not," Artie replied. "It's in the oral accounts, stories passed down, half erased by the Dutch, then buried by time." Mei Lin lowered her lens slightly. "Do the villagers know?" Artie nodded. "They know, but they won't say. They've grown used to silence." "Or afraid to break it," Arya muttered. Suddenly, a soft sound broke the air. A whisper. Not a word, just the shape of one, like someone breathing into your ear just before you wake. Everyone froze. The sound came again, this time from the jungle behind the pavilion. A faint rustle, a step. Artie turned quickly, heart hammering. There was nothing. Only trees, only vines, only the feeling that something had just ducked out of sight. Bayu gripped the machete tighter. "We're not supposed to be here." Artie looked back at the drum. "Just a few more minutes." "No," he said. "Now." The others didn't argue. They packed quickly, stepping carefully around the pit. As they turned to leave, Artie glanced back one last time, and for a single moment, only a flicker, she thought she saw her. A figure standing behind the drum, pale veil, tangled hair, a bridal headdress shimmering with silver thread, mouth sewn shut with black cord, fingers twitching, beating time, 3 beats, pause, 2. Artie blinked, and the figure was gone. The air was still again, but the rhythm lingered in her chest, like the echo of a drum you didn't know you had heard. They returned to the village in silence. No one spoke until they reached the house. Mei Lin checked her camera footage, only static in the pavilion shots. Arya swore under his breath and tried to boost the sound recordings. Nothing but background hiss. Bayu stepped out to find water. He didn't return for nearly an hour. When he did, he brought back 2 things: a bundle of rooster feathers tied with red string, and a story. "I spoke to an old woman near the river. She remembers the eclipse. She was a child when it happened. Said her mother was one of the dancers. Said they were warned not to play the drum, but the bride insisted." "Why?" Artie asked. "Because the shaman she was supposed to marry changed the rhythm. He played it wrong, on purpose." "To ruin the ceremony?" "No," he replied. "To summon something else, something older than the ancestors, something hungry." Artie sat down hard. "The bride wasn't a victim," Bayu added. "She was the offering." The room went quiet. Only the feathers rustled. Artie stared at her notebook, now smudged with sweat. The symbols she had drawn looked different now, like eyes or stitches. "Do you believe her?" Meilin asked. Bayou shrugged. "Doesn't matter." He held up the feathers. "We hang these tonight. Every door, every window. The woman said they keep the spirits from walking in." Arya scoffed. "Great, voodoo chicken dream catchers." "It's not about belief," Bayou said. "It's about respect." Artie said nothing. In her mind, the rhythm still played. 3 beats, pause, 2, and the bride's fingers twitched in time, blackened, stitched, still dancing. The temple was older than any map. It stood at the far edge of the village, leaning into the jungle like an old man leaning into memory. Its thatched roof had sagged into a slant, and its stone base was covered in moss the color of spoiled jade. The air around it smelled faintly of wet ash and dried flowers, offerings long since withered, yet not forgotten. Artie approached alone. The others had stayed behind to catalog the morning's footage, though there was little to show. Static, distortion, and that low, rhythmic hum that grew louder the longer you listened to it. The temple doors creaked open with a groan like breath held too long. Inside, shadows bloomed like vines. Faint light streamed through narrow slits in the walls, cutting across ancient altars, melted candles, and half-burnt incense sticks that hadn't been lit in years. And in the center of the altar stood a box. It was small, almost humble, barely the length of a forearm, carved from dark, polished wood that looked black in the dimness. No lock, no latch, just thick red twine wrapped 9 times around its length, the final knot marked with dried petals and a single drop of hardened wax. 9 times, Artie whispered, for the 9th night. She stepped forward slowly. There was a name burned into the wood, faint but still legible. Kartika, the vanished bride. Artie's hand trembled as she reached out. She didn't untie it, not yet. Instead, she leaned in, pressing her palm gently against the lid. It was cold, colder than it should have been in this heat. And beneath the wood, something pulsed. Not movement, not heat, but a pressure, like a heartbeat or a breath held for over a century. She drew back sharply, heart racing. "It's real," she murmured. She turned to leave and found the village elder standing silently in the doorway. Pakdarsan. He didn't look surprised to see her, nor angry, just tired. "You found her," he said softly. Artie nodded. "Is it true that she danced the rhythm wrong? That she was offered?" He stepped inside, sandals soundless on the temple floor. "No, it was not she who played the wrong rhythm. It was the one meant to marry her." "The shaman?" Pakdarsan nodded. "He was jealous, not of her, but of the ancestor spirits. He believed they answered too many prayers, protected too many souls. He wanted something older, wilder, something that could not be controlled. So, on the night of the eclipse, as the bride danced and the offerings were placed, he changed their rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 2, but reversed. He inverted the order, knowing the villagers wouldn't notice." "And they didn't?" "Not at first, but when the wind stopped and the shadows began to move backwards, they knew." He looked at Artie. "You know the rest." She swallowed hard. "The wedding party vanished?" "No," he said. They were taken. Taken where? The elder didn't answer. He only looked down at the box. That headdress, it was braided from the hair of 3 generations of women, a family offering, a symbol of devotion. But when the rhythm was corrupted, it became a vessel, a rope, a chain. Artie stepped closer. You mean it bound her? It bound something, child, and when the bride disappeared, the headdress remained, twisting, tainted. The elder sealed it in this box and buried it in the temple, not to protect us, but to keep her from finding it again. Artie felt the weight of that truth sink into her skin like rain through cloth. Why haven't you destroyed it? Pak Darson smiled faintly, sadly. Because you cannot burn memory, you cannot bury rhythm, and you cannot kill what was never truly alive. He turned to leave, then paused. Do not open it tonight. Wait until the new moon. If you must awaken the rhythm, do it in darkness. That is where it belongs. And with that, he was gone. That night, Artie couldn't sleep. The others lay scattered throughout the house, lulled into uneasy rest by exhaustion and heat. Bayou had hung rooster feathers over every door and window, just as the old woman had instructed. Still, the air felt thinner somehow, like the world was holding its breath again. Artie sat alone in the back room, the sealed box before her. She had carried it back in silence, wrapped it in a cloth, placed it gently on the floor as if afraid to wake it. Now it sat there humming softly without sound. She stared at it for what felt like hours. At midnight, she began to dream, though she had not yet closed her eyes. She saw a pavilion lit by eclipse light, a circle of dancers, eyes rolled back, fingers twitching, a drum at the center, pulsing like a living organ, and before it, Kartika. Her bridal veil fluttered like smoke, her mouth sewn shut, stitches black and glistening. Her fingers bloodied at the tips. Still she danced, still she followed the rhythm, and Artie could hear the beat rising beneath her ribs. Her hands began to twitch, her foot tapped involuntarily, her breath synced with the rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 2, over and over, until the beat stopped, and a voice, low, inhuman, and full of hunger, whispered from behind her ear, "She is still dancing, child, and you are still watching." Artie woke with a gasp, sweat soaking her shirt. Her hands were bleeding. She had scratched the pattern into the wooden floor beneath her. 3 lines, a pause, then 2. The box sat unmoved, untouched, but the red twine had come undone. The sky was too quiet. Even before the sun began to fade, even before the clouds shifted and the birds vanished, the villagers knew something was wrong. It was in the way their eyes darted toward the tree line, in the way they spoke in half sentences, in the way old women tied black threads around their grandchildren's wrists without explaining why. It was in the way no one dared ask Artie about the box. They could feel it, like a tremor beneath the skin, like the echo of a drum still waiting to be struck. Artie sat at the edge of the ruined pavilion, the Bedug Arwah still half buried beneath twisted roots and red soil. The box now lay open in her lap. The headdress inside was more terrible than she had imagined. It wasn't just braided hair. It was alive with memory. Some strands still shimmered, others had frayed into dust. Tied between them were bits of red thread, old coins, brittle rice grains blackened by time, and 3 tiny silver bells, one for each generation, the elder had said. And beneath the braid, pressed flat against the bottom of the box, lay a sliver of cloth embroidered with crimson thread in the shape of a crescent moon. "She danced under eclipse," she murmured. "So must I." She closed the box carefully. "We should start planning the reenactment," she said aloud. Mei Lin, sitting nearby with her camera, looked up sharply. "You're serious?" "It's part of the thesis. The ritual needs to be documented. The structure, the offerings, the rhythm, all of it." "You mean reenacted?" Artie met her gaze. "Yes. Even after last night? Especially after last night." Mei Lin looked uneasy. "You were sleepwalking, bleeding. You carved the rhythm into the floor, Artie. Which means I'm connected. Which means this is working." Arya, standing a few feet away with the sound recorder, snorted. "That's not research, that's possession." Bayu didn't say anything. He just stared at the treetops, at the way the light was already beginning to bend, though the eclipse was still 2 days away. "We do it safely, symbolically. We reconstruct the steps without activating the rhythm. We control the environment. We film everything. We respect the form, but we don't awaken the function." Bayu finally spoke. "You really think you can control this?" "I have to." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded once. "Then we do it on the 9th night, as close as we can, but we do it our way." The villagers watched from behind doorways. They didn't interfere, but they didn't help either. Artie spent the next 2 days researching the precise structure of the ritual, consulting old manuscripts, temple carvings, oral accounts from the few remaining elders willing to speak. Mei Lin documented the preparations, filming the dried joss paper, the banana leaf trays, the exact placement of the blood-soaked rice offering. They chose not to use real blood. Bayu mixed red paint with crushed betel nut and palm sugar. It smelled close enough. The gamelan instruments had been borrowed from the nearby town's abandoned school. They were old, dusty, slightly out of tune, but that almost made them feel more authentic. Only the Bedug Arwah remained untouched. It stayed half-buried in the pavilion center, like a wound in the earth. They filmed around it, never striking it, never daring to clear the vines from its base. Arya refused to go near it at all. "He hums," he said once, adjusting his audio levels. "Even when we don't record, it's like the air around it vibrates." Artie didn't deny it. She had felt it too. The closer you got to the drum, the harder it was to think, like your thoughts got pulled into a rhythm you hadn't realized you were hearing. On the evening before the eclipse, Pak Darsan came to the house uninvited. He stood in the doorway holding a bundle of black cloth. "For her," he said, placing it on the table. Artie opened it carefully. Inside was a ceremonial kabaya, a traditional wedding blouse, pale cream, stained with time and age. The sleeves were embroidered with faded lotus flowers, and the collar was stiff with gold thread. "It was hers," Pak Darsan said. "Kartika's. It was returned after the ritual, folded outside the temple with a single silver bell sewn on the sleeve." "She left it behind?" asked Artie. "Or something left it behind for her." The elder looked at her then, not with anger or fear, but with a quiet sorrow. "If you wear this tomorrow," he said, "you are not just playing her, you are welcoming her." Artie's voice was barely a whisper. "Is that what she wants?" He closed his eyes. "It's not about what she wants anymore." And then he left. The morning of the eclipse came heavy with fog. Thick mist poured from the jungle like smoke from a mouth too long closed. The village was silent, not empty, just watching. Windows shuttered, doors bolted, curtains pulled tight. It felt like a town bracing for a storm they didn't have a name for. Artie dressed in the ceremonial kebaya. The fabric clung cold to her skin. The silver bell on the sleeve jingled faintly when she moved, even though there was no wind. Bayu lit the joss paper in a rusted iron bowl. Mei Lin set the camera to record. Arya stood further back, headphones on, eyes scanning the trees. This is the 9th night ritual reenactment, performed under a partial eclipse, offerings in place, gamelan instruments arranged, drum untouched. She stepped barefoot onto the center stones, just as the script described. Bayu played the metallophone, soft, uneven notes that shimmered like water. Mei Lin followed with a gentle gong. Arya's audiometer spiked with each chime. Artie raised her arms slowly, fingers arched in the bridal mudra. She moved through the sequence, step by step, careful, slow. One turn, a bow, another step, and then the air shifted. The fog stilled. The trees no longer moved. Bayu's mallet slowed. The gong fell silent, and then, without anyone touching it, the Bedug Arwah gave a single, hollow beat, low, wet, final. The team froze. "Arya, was that you?" Mei Lin whispered. "I didn't touch anything," he replied, voice tight. Artie turned slowly. The drum sat unmoved, but the vines around its base had withered, blackened, as if something had breathed on them from within. "We need to stop," Bayu said. "Keep rolling," Artie replied, heart pounding. "Don't stop. Artie, we don't run from this." Then the wind came back. All at once, leaves flew sideways, the flames in the offering bowls went out, the joss paper scattered. And above them, the sun began to bleed. The eclipse had begun. A disk of darkness slid across the sky, swallowing light, swallowing warmth. And somewhere beyond the pavilion, beyond the trees, beyond even the world they knew, something stirred. Something that remembered the rhythm. Something that had waited for it. That night, the rooster feathers tied to the windows turned black, one by one. No one spoke of it. They just watched as the wind died again, and the shadows on the walls began to twitch. Not flicker, twitch, out of rhythm. It began with silence. The kind of silence that feels unnatural. Not the quiet of dawn or the hush before a storm, but the silence that falls when everything else has already fled. The morning after the eclipse, no birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the wind, so restless the night before, seemed to have abandoned the village entirely. Only the trees moved, just barely, as if breathing. Artie sat at the edge of the pavilion ruins again, staring down at the Bedug Arwah. The vines around it had completely withered overnight, curling into black husks. The soil had cracked where the roots once held, revealing more of the drum's body, a dark, swollen curve of wood marred with what looked like bite marks. Not erosion, not time. Marks. Deep. Jagged, as if something inside had tried to tear its way out. Bayu stood nearby with a spade in his hands, unmoving. "We shouldn't do this," he said. "We need to," Artie replied. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled. "It's not research anymore. It's not a reenactment. This is waking something. It was already waking. The beat came on its own. We can't pretend anymore. The only way forward is through." She stepped into the pit, her knees sinking into damp earth, and laid her hands on the edge of the drum. It was warm, not with sunlight, but with breath. It pulsed faintly under her palms, like the echo of a heart that shouldn't be beating. She nodded once. Bayou began to dig. It took them most of the day. The soil was strange, soft one moment, then packed like clay the next. There were stones that looked too perfectly round, and fragments of cloth that hadn't rotted even after 100 years. Mei Lin filmed from a distance. Arya refused to enter the pit at all. "A record from up here," he muttered. "I don't want to get close to that thing." When the full drum was finally unearthed, no one spoke. It was massive, larger than they expected. Its frame was made of a dark wood veined with crimson, like blood soaked into the grain. Iron nails, no, bone pegs, were driven into its sides, each one carved with tiny symbols too worn to read. But the skin was the worst part. It was still intact, taut, stretched, smooth, and pale. "Is that cowhide?" Mei Lin asked, though their voice shook. "No," Artie whispered. "It's not." Bayou looked at her. "You don't mean—" She nodded. "It said the bride's wail was woven from hair, but the drum was veiled too, with skin." The silence returned. And then Artie picked up the mallet. It had been found buried beside the drum, wrapped in silk, preserved perfectly. Its handle was carved from sandalwood, worn smooth by hands long gone. The head was wrapped in dried cloth. It smelled of cloves and something else beneath, something metallic. She stepped forward. Bayou grabbed her wrist. "Don't! Just one strike to document the sound." "No, I have to." She pulled free, raised the mallet, and struck the drum. The sound wasn't loud. It was deep. A low, bone-hollow thump that didn't echo, but sank into the soil, into their skin, into their lungs. For a second, nothing happened. Then Arya dropped his headphones and screamed. He clawed at his ears, eyes wide, falling backward onto the grass. "Stop it! Stop it! It's in my head!" Bayou rushed to him. "What do you hear?" "It's not a sound. It's a voice behind the sound, under it, through it." Artie stepped back from the drum, stunned. Arya kept shaking, curling into himself like something was pulling strings inside his spine. "Turn it off! Turn it off! Turn it off!" But there was nothing to turn off, only the after rhythm still vibrating in the earth. They carried Arya back to the house. He didn't speak for hours, just lay on the floor, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, occasionally twitching as if in sleep. Bayou paced. Mei Lin reviewed the audio, and Artie sat with the headdress in her lap, the silver bells now trembling on their own, without touch, without wind. "It's real," she said aloud. "Everything they said, it's real." Bayou stopped. "What if we bury it again? All of it. The drum, the headdress, everything." "It's too late," Artie replied. "We played the rhythm. We struck the skin. We opened the box. The drum isn't waiting anymore. It's listening." "To what?" "To us." She looked at Arya, still shivering on the floor. "To him." "Why him?" Artie hesitated, then spoke what she hadn't dared admit until now. "Because he's not part of the bloodline." Bayou frowned. You think it only affects those who aren't descendants? No, she said slowly. I think it affects everyone, but the ones who share the bride's blood. She touched her own chest. We don't hear it with our ears. We feel it, like it's always been inside us. Bayu stared at her. How long have you been hearing it? Artie closed her eyes. Since I was 8, after my grandmother died. That night I had a dream. A woman in white, her mouth sewn shut. She placed her hand on my chest and tapped. She mimed it. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. She didn't speak, but I woke up with that rhythm in my body, and it never left. Bayu said nothing. Because what was there to say? Some curses are not spoken. They're inherited. That night, Arya finally slept, and the rest of the house didn't. The rooster feathers on the windows had turned brittle and gray. The candles burned low, even though they had just been lit. Outside, the jungle was silent again, until just before dawn, when the drum played itself. 1 beat, pause, 2 beats. And in the faint light of the dying fire, Artie saw the headdress move. Not shake, not twitch, but lift, as if worn, as if someone had put it on. And in the reflection of the darkened glass, she saw a bride standing behind her, veil torn, fingers blackened, still dancing.
The sky bled red as the 9th night began. Not the red of sunset. This was deeper, like diluted blood poured across the clouds. It stained the treetops. It soaked into the mist, and it refused to fade, even after the last trace of daylight slipped behind the mountains. No one in the village lit lanterns. No one sang prayers. Doors were bolted, curtains nailed shut. Salt lines were dragged across thresholds by shaking hands. Rooster feathers were burned, and not a single villager stepped outside. They knew what night it was. They had always known. Inside the house, Artie moved like a woman sleepwalking through her own death. She wore the bride's kebaya again. It fit more easily this time, like it remembered her body. The headdress rested on her lap, shimmering faintly in the candlelight. Its bells had fallen silent, though not from peace, from expectation. Bayu watched her with quiet dread. You're not actually going to perform it again, are you? I have to. No, Artie, you don't. This isn't about a thesis anymore. This is about survival. She looked up at him. Exactly. And if we run now, it follows. You saw what happened when we buried it the first time. It didn't stop the rhythm. It just silenced it, temporarily. Bayu looked toward Arya's room. The door was closed. Behind it, the sound tech hadn't spoken a word in almost 24 hours. He's getting worse, Bayu said. He hums in his sleep now. The same rhythm? Bayu nodded. It's not just haunting us anymore. It's inhabiting us. The plan was simple. At least, it should have been. They would perform the full ritual, intentionally this time, as accurately as the old texts and fading memories would allow. Not just to document it, but to understand it, to finish what had been started a century ago. Maybe the bride had been betrayed. Maybe the rhythm had been corrupted. But perhaps, just perhaps, by completing it the right way, by restoring what had been broken, they could lay it to rest. Or so Artie hoped. They returned to the pavilion at midnight. The path was different now, twisted. Not physically. No trees had moved, but it felt wrong. As if the jungle had reoriented itself. As if the forest was watching them with 100 closed eyes, waiting to blink. The pavilion stood taller somehow, though its wood was still rotting. The stone floor had dried into a perfect circle, cracks forming runes no one recognized. And at the center, the Bedug Arwah stood uncovered, breathing. Yes, breathing. Its surface expanded with slow, silent inhales, then sank again, as if it had lungs, as if it had waited years to be played again. Arti lit the offerings herself. Banana leaf trays soaked with red palm syrup. Paper shaped like silver coins, folded in threes. Bowls of white rice streaked with dried betel juice and ashes from her grandmother's letters. She placed them around the drum like a clock. 9 points, 9 offerings, 9 nights. The others set up the instruments. Bayu tuned the metallophone. Mei Lin adjusted the camera. Arya remained behind. He had followed them, but only as far as the edge of the pavilion. Now he stood at the tree line, arms limp, head tilted sideways, as if listening to something only he could hear. The ritual began. Soft notes echoed across the clearing. The metallophone rang like the bones of birds. The gongs shimmered like bells underwater. And then Arti stepped into the circle. Barefoot, pale, silent. She wore the veil over her head now, and the headdress sat snug across her brow. The bells did not jingle, they throbbed. She moved in silence, her feet tracing the steps of the bride, turning left, bowing right, arms sweeping in slow circles. Her eyes remained open, unblinking. Bayu watched her from behind the camera. Mei Lin whispered timestamps under her breath. Arya still stood unmoving at the edge of the woods. And then the drum played itself. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. Not loud, but final. Everyone froze. The rhythm continued. 3, pause, 2. No one touched the drum. It beat on its own. The air thickened. The ground trembled. The offerings began to rot fast. The rice turned black. The banana leaves curled inward like hands shriveling in fire. The silver joss paper caught flame without spark, burning upward in columns of white smoke. And then the shadows began to move. Not cast by anything, not stretched by light. They moved independently. They walked along the edge of the stone circle, tracing the boundary with fingers made of smoke and grief. One of them reached toward the drum, but could not touch it. It recoiled, as if something else already claimed it. And in the center of it all, Arti danced. Her arms twitched unnaturally now, her fingers bent backwards, her spine curved in rhythm with the drum. She didn't scream, she just moved, like a puppet on strings. Bayu stepped forward, panic rising. "Arti!" No answer. The drum grew louder, the beat faster, the rhythm wrong. And then Arya screamed. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. "She's not dancing for them, she's dancing for it!" What? The shaman changed the beat to summon something else. He invited it, and now it's using her. The shadows lunged. Bayu grabbed Arti and pulled her from the circle. The moment her foot left the final stone, the drum stopped. All at once. The wind exploded outward. The offerings turned to ash, the pavilion collapsed, and the veil fell from Artie's face. Her mouth was sewn shut. Real stitches, black thread pulled through skin that had not been touched before. She clawed at her lips, wide-eyed, blood streaming down her chin. Bayu tore at the thread, unraveling the horror one knot at a time. When she could finally breathe, she screamed, but not a scream of fear, a scream of recognition. It wasn't her. The bride wasn't the sacrifice. Then who? Artie turned slowly toward the tree line, where Arya had stood, but now stood no longer. All that remained were 2 footprints in the earth, and the distant sound of drums beating deeper into the forest, calling something home. The jungle had swallowed him whole. No blood, no screams, no trail. Just 2 perfect footprints pressed into the earth, and silence. Bayu called his name for over an hour. Mei Lin scanned the tree line with her camera on infrared, catching only static and streaks of interference that bent like twisted limbs. Artie stood barefoot beside the burned pavilion ruins, eyes fixed on nothing, her lips raw where the stitches had been torn away. "He's not gone," she said quietly. "We watched him disappear," Bayu replied. "No," she whispered. "He was taken." The rhythm hadn't stopped. It had only moved deeper into the forest. She could still feel it, like phantom hands tapping her spine. She didn't know whether it was a memory, madness, or a calling. "He's not the first," she murmured. "The wedding party vanished. 37 people. They weren't killed. They were bound to the rhythm, just like Arya." Bayu turned to her, voice tight. "Then what happens if we follow it?" She looked up at him. "We find the bride." They returned to the house in silence. The rooster feathers hanging over the windows had turned to dust. The candles wouldn't light, and the mirrors, each one, had fractured clean through the center, splitting reflections in half. Mei Lin sat in the corner, replaying the footage from the 9th night ritual. "It's all corrupted," she muttered, "like it was filmed underwater." She paused, except for the part where Arhi danced. Bayu walked over and peered over her shoulder. "What's that on the edge of the frame?" Mei Lin leaned closer. In the darkness, beyond the circle of instruments, a figure stood in the trees, pale, still, wearing the same kabaya Artie had worn, but older, yellowed, and covered in ash. Its head was bowed. Its fingers moved slowly, twitching in rhythm, and its mouth sewn shut. "That's not Artie," Bayu said quietly. "That's her," Mei Lin replied. "The bride." That night, Artie did not sleep. Instead, she walked, barefoot, alone, into the jungle. Bayu found her an hour later, standing in the clearing where the ritual had taken place, staring into the darkness. "I can feel her," she said without turning. "She's getting closer." Bayu didn't answer. He stood beside her in the quiet, letting the silence settle between them. Then, without warning, the sound returned. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. But not from the drum, from the trees. It was footsteps, soft, bare, rhythmic. They turned slowly, and there she was, the bride. She stepped from the jungle mist like a memory rising from sleep. Her veil trailed behind her like smoke. Her feet were black with soil. Her fingers twitched at her sides, stained at the tips as though dipped in ink or rot. She did not rock, she danced. Slow, dragging motions, arms bending in time with the rhythm no one else could hear. Her mouth was still sewn shut, but the skin around it bulged, twitched, like something inside was trying to speak. Bayu stepped back. Arti stepped forward. "Kartika," she whispered. The bride paused, tilted her head. The bells on the headdress jingled, though no wind stirred them. And then she pointed, not at Arti, not at Bayu, but behind them, to the house, to Mei Lin. They ran. When they reached the house, the front door was open. Inside, the camera equipment had been overturned, salt lines scattered, the candles burned with black flame. And Mei Lin stood in the center of the room, her back arched, her mouth open in a silent scream. The air shimmered around her, like heat off pavement. "Mei Lin!" Arti shouted, but she didn't respond. Her eyes were rolled back, her hands moved like she was playing an invisible instrument, her fingers twitching in the exact rhythm of the drum. 3, pause, 2, and then a voice. But it did not come from Mei Lin. It came from inside the drum, distant, echoing, feral. One bride was never enough. Mei Lin collapsed. They carried her to the back room, laid her on the bed. She was breathing, but shallow. Her skin was ice cold. "She's still hearing it," Arti said, "but not like before. It's inside her now." Bayu shook his head. "How do we stop it?" Arti turned slowly toward the headdress, which lay on the table, bells trembling. "We don't stop it." "What do you mean?" "The bride was never trying to escape. She's spreading." Bayu stared at her. "You mean this whole ritual, it wasn't about summoning her?" "No, it was about preparing the next. The next what? The next bride." They burned the veil that night, wrapped it in salt, bound it in joss paper, set it alight, and watched the flames consume it. But the bells didn't melt. They just rang, louder than before. And in the forest, they heard a chorus of footsteps, dozens, all in rhythm, and among them, one voice, one singular thread-torn whisper. "I waited. I watched. Now, dance with me." By dawn, the jungle was whispering, not in words, but in rhythm. Leaves rustled in threes, branches snapped in twos. Somewhere far off, a stream burbled in a pattern that no longer felt natural. 3, pause, 2. The world itself had begun to echo the drum, and only some could hear it. Mei Lin hadn't woken. Her body lay still, her chest rising and falling with painful effort, but her fingers moved constantly, twitching in half-beats, dancing in her sleep. Her lips moved too, but no sound escaped. Arti tried everything. Cold compresses, lavender oil, mantras, even soft gamelan tones through headphones. Nothing broke the rhythm. Bayu paced the floor. "This isn't possession, it's resonance," he muttered. Arti looked at him. "What do you mean?" "It's like a tuning fork. You hit the right frequency and everything around it starts to hum, even things that were never meant to." He paused. "She wasn't meant to. Because she's not part of the bloodline. Artie said softly. Bayu nodded. Like Arya. They stared at each other in silence. Then Artie said what they were both thinking. That means I'm next. The realization settled over her like a shroud. She had tried to revive a ritual, but the ritual had revived her. She was a conduit now, a thread, a missing stitch in a tapestry far older than memory. The bride had chosen her, not because she was worthy, but because she was related, because the blood remembers. Artie began hearing the rhythm in her sleep, but not as sound, as movement. Her body would twitch in time, her jaw would clench, her shoulders would sway. She woke each morning with her toes pointed outward, her fingers curled like she had been holding an invisible veil. She stopped speaking in full sentences, not because she couldn't, but because the rhythm no longer allowed it. Words came in bursts. 3 syllables. Pause. 2 more. We must go deeper in. She still waits beneath roots. Not all sleep. Some still dance. Bayu began writing them down, not as nonsense, but as messages, clues, fragments of what the rhythm wanted, of what the bride remembered. On the 3rd night, Mei Lin sat up. Without warning, without sound. Her eyes were glassy, her mouth shut tight, and she began humming. Low, monotone. 3 notes. Pause. 2. Over and over. Bayu tried to reach her. She turned sharply, her head snapping toward him with an audible crack. Don't, Artie said. She's not here. Then who is? Artie didn't answer, because she knew. That night, the villagers began boarding up their homes, not just their windows, but their entire homes, nailing doors shut, covering thatch roofs with clay, digging trenches filled with lime around their houses like makeshift graves. The jungle was louder now. The trees creaked in rhythm. The wind hissed in waves. Even the cicadas clicked in time. Pak Darson found them just before sundown. He had aged 10 years in 2 days. His hand shook as he passed Artie a bundle wrapped in banana leaves. Inside was an old scroll, stained and fragile. It's the original verse, he said. The rhythm, written in ink and blood. The counter chant. You knew this? Artie asked. No one speaks it, not anymore. It was buried. Because it could stop her? Pak Darson looked down. No, he said, because it could free her. They unwrapped the scroll at midnight. The characters were Javanese, but altered, flowing like river bends. Each line ended in a glyph that resembled an open mouth stitched shut. The rhythm was written beneath each verse. 3 dots. Pause. 2 lines. Over and over. But near the bottom, the pattern broke. A smear, a splatter, a note that trailed off into empty parchment. This is where the ritual failed, Artie said. The shaman reversed the final beat. So how do we finish it? Bayu asked. Artie placed her fingers over the glyph, and her mouth opened unbidden. The words spilled out like breath long held. Bind the veil, burn the braid, still the breath, let none fade. When the drum calls the red, close the mouth or join the dead. Mei Lin's bells rang in the next room. She hadn't moved, but the bells had. By themselves, as if the bride had heard the chant and did not approve. The sky darkened unnaturally. Not storm clouds, not nightfall. A haze, like old smoke or spirit ash. Bayu checked the mirror. His reflection blinked slower than he did, and Mei Lin's had no eyes. Artie sat on the floor, eyes closed, the scroll in her lap. She no longer tried to fight the rhythm. Instead, she tried to follow it, to feel where it led. And for the first time, she saw beyond the bride. She saw a room, stone, wet, circular, dozens of figures, all dancing, all veiled, all silent. The bride stood in the center, but she was no longer alone. Arya was there, his mouth sewn shut, his eyes gone, his hands twitching, trying to keep time, trying not to fall behind. Because if you fell behind, you vanished. Artie awoke with a gasp. There's a chamber, underground. Where? Beneath the pavilion, the stone ring is a lid, a seal. And the drum? It's the key. She looked up, eyes wild. They were never lost. The wedding party, Arya, they weren't killed. Then where are they? They're still dancing. The chickens were gone. Every one. Not a feather left behind. Not a single print in the dirt. Just empty coops and the overwhelming silence where there should have been life. Bayu noticed it first, at dawn. The roosters, he whispered. All of them. Artie stood beside him in the fog-drenched path. The village was unnaturally still again, and the coops behind the houses looked abandoned, like miniature graveyards of lost sound. They were warnings, she said, not just superstitions. They were part of the seal. And now they're gone, which means... Artie didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to, because a moment later, they saw it, hanging from the tree near the center of the village. A string of feathers braided into a circle. But these weren't rooster feathers. They were black, and they dripped blood. Pak Darsan called it the turning. It's when the veil between their world and ours begins to rot, when the seal thins and the dead begin to remember the path back. Why the feathers? Bayu asked. The old man stared at the bloody braid. Because they've begun to mimic us. Inside the house, Mei Lin still slept, if you could call it sleep. She did not eat, did not blink. Her breathing was shallow, mechanical, like something remembering how lungs work. Her fingers twitched still. Her eyes moved beneath the lids. And when Artie sat beside her, holding her hand, she felt something else pulse beneath the skin. A second rhythm, out of sync with the heart. Something older, something drumming. They returned to the pavilion by noon. The jungle path had narrowed, not from growth, but from pressure, as if the trees leaned in, trying to listen. The pavilion's remains were still scattered, but the stone circle at its center was clearer than before. The moss was gone. The cracks had widened. It was no longer just a floor. It was a lid. Artie crouched, brushing dirt from the edges. There were symbols carved along the perimeter, weathered but still legible. She traced them with her finger. 9 names. She didn't recognize most of them, but the last one she did. Kartika Ayu, the bride. Bayu watched as Artie placed her palm flat in the center of the circle. This is the chamber, she said. They're beneath us. Then we leave them there. We can't. Why not? She looked up. Because they're not asleep anymore. That night, the sky opened. Not with rain, but with sound. Low, pulsing, like distant thunder with breath, like drums buried beneath the ground. The earth hummed, the trees swayed without wind, and the headdress bells rang though no one touched them. Artie lit candles in a circle around Meilin, laying salted rice and copper coins at each point. "It's a binding ring," she told Bayu. "If the bride tries to finish what she started, we can trap her between rhythms." "How do you know that?" "I don't." She paused. "But someone inside me does." Bayu didn't argue, because the house was shrinking, not physically, but spiritually. The shadows grew longer, sharper. And then Meilin sat up, eyes wide, mouth shut. But she was smiling. It wasn't hers. It was too wide, too calm, too familiar. Artie backed away. Bayu stood between them instinctively, clutching a piece of sharpened iron from the old temple door. "It's not her," he whispered. Artie nodded. "It's the bride." Meilin's head tilted. Her fingers moved in elegant spirals, faster than before. Then she spoke, but not in her voice. In Artie's. "I waited for you, sister. I watched you grow. I watched you learn my name. I watched you uncover my ruin." Bayu stepped forward. "Leave her." The bride's voice dropped. "She is only the veil. I am the face beneath it." "Then what do you want?" Meilin's hands rose. The bells on the headdress began to ring on their own, hard, violent, clashing like wind chimes in a storm. "I want you," the bride hissed. "You are the final verse, the last bloodline. You are the beat that completes the rhythm." And then Meilin collapsed. When dawn broke, her mouth was sewn shut again, this time with hair, long, black, and still wet. Artie cut it free with trembling hands, weeping silently as Meilin lay unconscious once more. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I thought I was strong enough, but—" "You are," Bayu said. "She's using people, hollowing them out. She'll keep going until I—" "Until you what?" She looked at him. "Until I go down there." The scroll spoke of a final offering, one that could bind the bride again, not with pain, not with prayer, but with a rhythm played in reverse at the mouth of the chamber by blood of her own line. It was a closing verse, but it came with a warning. If the beat falters, if the blood hesitates, the bride does not leave, she climbs. Artie looked at the drum one last time. Its surface was cracked now, breathing in short gasps. Its edge had bled. She placed her hand on the center and whispered, "I will finish your song." And beneath her fingers it pulsed. 3 times, paused, then once. A final invitation to descend, to meet the bride where the rhythm first began. The chamber had no door, only a crack, a hairline fracture in the stone ring at the center of the ruined pavilion, just wide enough to fit a hand or slip a soul through. By nightfall, that crack had widened. The jungle watched in breathless silence as Artie knelt beside it, brush in hand, sweeping away the last layer of red soil. Bayu stood behind her with a lantern, casting long shadows across the overgrown circle. "You're sure this is it?" he asked. Artie didn't look up. "She's underneath." "And you're planning to go down?" She nodded. "Alone?" "Yes." Bayu hesitated. "Why?" Her voice was steady. "Because I'm the last of her blood." "What if that's exactly what she wants?" Artie finally looked at him. "It is." They pried the stone lid loose just after midnight. The earth moaned as it moved, like something ancient had been holding it shut from beneath. As the lid rolled aside, a breath of air escaped from the hole. It smelled like wet cloth, rot, and old fire. A narrow tunnel descended into blackness, just wide enough for a body to crawl. Bayu tied a rope around Artie's waist. If anything pulls, anything, you shout. And if I don't come back, then I burn the drum, the headdress, everything. Artie gave him a faint smile. You won't have to. The tunnel dropped for meters, then widened. Artie landed hard on stone. She stood slowly, her lantern flickering against the damp air. The space opened into a chamber, circular, cracked, and full of shadows that moved like thoughts. At the center stood a gamelan circle, rusted and silent. Gongs, metallophones, bone chimes, arranged like an orchestra left mid-performance. And in the very middle, surrounded by dust-covered offerings, was a chair. No, not a chair, a throne. Carved from blackwood and bone, polished with blood, and inscribed with a name etched deeper than the others. Raksa, the shaman. Artie stepped closer. Bones littered the floor, dried cloth offerings, charred wood, empty jars, silver coins with bite marks. But it wasn't until she saw the mask that she felt the breath leave her. It hung above the throne, a carved wooden face with hollow eyes and a mouth twisted into a permanent grin. The mask of the ritual master. And below it, pinned to the wall by old nails, was a scroll. Torn, burned at the edges, but legible. A rhythm was written across the top, different from the others. Inverted. Instead of 3 pause 2, it read 2 pause 3. The corrupted verse, Artie whispered. She touched the parchment. The air shuddered. The gongs vibrated, and from the shadows behind the throne, a voice rose. She danced for peace. I played for power. She gave her body. I gave her to them. The throne was empty, but the shaman's spirit remained. A shadow unfurled from behind the chair, tall, thin, robes dripping with ash and hair. His hands were too long, his fingers curved inwards like hooks. And his face wore the same mask. His voice was not human. It was a blend of whispers, drum beats, and bone chimes. You carry her blood. You carry her guilt. Come to finish the dance? Artie stood firm. I came to break it. The shaman kilted his head. You cannot silence a rhythm once it is written in blood. You can only play it to the end. He raised one hand. The gamelan instruments lifted off the ground, levitating slowly, surrounding Artie in a floating circle of sound. He raised his other hand, and the drum descended from the ceiling, suspended by hair and bells, its skin still breathing. The rhythm began. 2 beats. Pause. 3. The corrupted pattern, the one that opened the veil. Artie closed her eyes and answered it, not with voice, but with memory. She saw Kartika, the bride, standing in the same circle a century ago, dancing not in joy, but in sacrifice, eyes full of betrayal, mouth sewn shut, hands moving because they had to, not because they wanted to. And behind her,
Raksa, the shaman, smiling, reversing the beat, summoning not ancestors, but something older, something that needed a door. And the bride became that door. The rhythm reached its peak. The air in the chamber crackled, shadows screamed, the instruments shook so violently they cracked. But Arti didn't flinch. She walked to the center, pulled the scroll from her pocket, and began the final verse. Bind the veil, burn the braid, still the breath, let none fade. When the drum calls the red, close the mouth or join the dead. The shaman roared, his mask splintered, the instruments fell, and from the shadows behind the throne, the bride stepped forward. But now her mouth was open. The stitches had come undone. Her lips trembled, and from her throat came a sound no living woman had ever made. A wail that reversed the rhythm. 2, pause, 3, flipped into 3, pause, 2. The original pattern, the one of protection, the one of rest, the one of peace. Arti joined her, 2 voices, 1 rhythm, and the shaman shattered into dust. The chamber cracked, stones split, the air turned cold, and one by one the veiled dancers appeared, all of them, the vanished wedding party, including Arya. Eyes returned, mouths unstuck, silent but free. The bride reached for Arti's hand and smiled, not with madness, but with gratitude. She nodded, and then she stepped backward into the shadows. Gone. The rhythm faded, and with it, so did the drum. Arti climbed out of the tunnel at dawn. Bayu pulled her up with shaking hands. Is it over? She looked at the sky. The sun had risen straight. No haze, no mist. Birds had returned, and somewhere in the distance a rooster crowed. She nodded. It's finished. The air smelled different now. Not clean, not cured, but emptied, like the jungle had exhaled something it had held in its chest for too long. The village felt lighter, but not free. The sky was clear, but the shadows hadn't fully left. Something still lingered. The drum was gone, vanished without trace. The circle of stone where it had once stood now held only dried leaves and the faint outline of ash. Even the symbols etched into the pavilion's floor had faded overnight, as though they too were part of the ritual's unraveling. But not everything had disappeared. The headdress remained. It sat where Arti had left it, on the altar inside the abandoned temple, wrapped in red silk, resting in silence. Bayu had begged her not to touch it again, but she knew. The rhythm might have ended, but the story hadn't. She unwrapped the silk slowly. The bells didn't ring this time. The braid had darkened, deep auburn now, no longer glinting in the light. It looked heavier, as though soaked in something unseen, and nestled within its coils, nearly invisible before, was a thin sliver of parchment. Arti gently pulled it free. It had been hidden between 2 strands of hair, tucked deep, protected by decades of ritual silence. It wasn't just a note, it was a confession. To the one who finds this, I am Kartika Ayu, and I was never meant to marry the shaman. I was in love with another, a woman. Her name was Sri. She braided this headdress with my mother's hair, my grandmother's, and her own. She was to flee with me the night of the ritual, but Raksa found out. He reversed the rhythm, not to summon power, but to curse love. He could not bear the idea of me loving anyone but him, so he bound me, sealed me inside a rhythm that would trap my spirit until my bloodline danced me free. If you read this, and you are of me, know this: love never dies, even when the drum stops beating. Bury me where we first kissed, beneath the banyan tree by the river's bend. Let me go. Arti read it 3 times. The words bled into her chest like ink into cloth. It had never just been a haunting. It had been a heartbreak, a betrayal, a love story twisted by vengeance and silenced by ritual. And the headdress, this sacred, cursed artifact, was not just a vessel of spirits. It was a message in hair and bells, braided in grief, waiting for a descendant to finally understand. That afternoon, Arti and Bayu walked to the river's bend. The banyan tree still stood, its roots thick, its branches bowed low like arms in mourning. The water ran slow and soft here, untouched by the turmoil deeper in the forest. She carried the headdress in her arms, wrapped again, this time with reverence. No camera, no notebook, no ritual, just memory and the wind. They dug the grave beneath the shade of the tree. Bayu said nothing as Arti placed the headdress into the earth, smoothing the soil with her bare hands. She whispered, "You were never a curse. You were a woman in love, and no one listened." She placed a single silver bell atop the mound. It didn't ring. It glowed, then dimmed. That night, Arti dreamed, but not of the bride, not of the drum, not of dancers in the dark. She dreamed of 2 women sitting beneath a banyan tree, laughing softly, fingers intertwined. One wore the headdress, the other tucked a flower into her hair. No music, no blood, just peace. And when Arti awoke, her pillow was damp with tears. But her heartbeat was her own. The drum was gone. The bride was buried. The rhythm had ceased. And yet, the village still listened. Because some echoes don't fade, they just fall out of rhythm, lurking between silence and memory. It began again on the 7th night after the burial, not with sound, but with movement. Arti awoke to find her hands twitching in her sleep, fingers pulsing against the blanket as though tracing the steps of a forgotten dance. She forced them still, but the rhythm returned the next night. Not her hands this time, her breath. Inhaled 3 short bursts, held, then 2 longer exhales. 3, pause, 2. The pattern haunted her body now, not her mind. Bayu noticed it first in the villagers, the way they walked in step, the way they stirred soup in spirals, 3 circles, pause, 2 taps on the edge of the bowl. The way babies cried, not randomly, but with cadence. He didn't say anything at first, until he heard it in the wind chimes. Arti had hung them outside the house after the burial, silver pipes gifted by Pak Darsan,
meant to honor Kartika's memory. They were beautiful, until one morning they played the rhythm perfectly. "It's not her," Bayu said, watching the chimes with wary eyes. Arti stood beside him, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Then what is it?" He looked at her, eyes hollow, voice low. "The rhythm, detached. It's become independent." They went to the temple again. The altar was clean, the headdress still buried, but on the wall, someone or something had scratched a new set of marks. Not letters, beats. Dozens of tallies grouped in patterns of 3 and 2, slashed into the stone with what looked like bone. Bayu turned pale. "She's not playing it anymore." "No," Arti said. "It's playing itself." The next day, Mei Lin woke up. For the first time in nearly 2 weeks, she sat upright, her eyes unfocused, her lips dry and cracked, but her mouth moved, whispering. Arti leaned in. "Mei Lin." "It's not over," she rasped. "What do you mean?" Mei Lin blinked slowly, her voice barely a breath. "It found new players." Then she fell back onto the pillow, unconscious again, and the silver bells above the doorway rang in time with her pulse. That night, Arti checked the old footage again, the corrupted footage of the ritual. She watched the frames flicker and distort, her face bending unnaturally as the rhythm swelled. But this time, she paused at frame 93 and saw something she hadn't before. A face, not Kartika's, not hers. A third face, peeking from behind the trees, half buried in shadow, smiling. And then, even though she hadn't hit play, the footage moved. The drum struck. Once. Twice. Pause. 3 times. Reverse rhythm. And the screen cut to black. Bayu called it the feedback loop. He said the ritual was never just a one-time event. It was a circuit, a design. Once the beat begins, it creates openings, not just in space, but in time. "So we finished the ritual, but we didn't end it," Bayu nodded. "We completed her rhythm, but not his." The shaman, Raksa. He had not just reversed the drumbeat, he had written his own echo, designed to continue, to outlive him, like a virus passed through music, through memory. And now it was playing on its own, detached from flesh, detached from Kartika, but still hungry. That night, the wind didn't blow, but the windows rattled, and in the distance they heard a faint percussion. Not drums, not footsteps, but knocking, steady, patterned. 3. Pause. 2. Bayu opened the door with a flashlight in hand. There was no one outside, only a single stone placed at the threshold, carved with 2 words, "Your turn." Arti dreamed again, not of the bride, but of the shaman. He stood in the ruined pavilion, eyes black and empty, mask cracked, arms outstretched. Behind him, rows of dancers, faceless, limbs jerking in broken rhythm. One of them was Arya, another Mei Lin, and the last was her, but not alive, not moving. Her body suspended by strings, her face painted with the same wide grin as the mask, her fingers tapping endlessly against the floor. Even in death, still dancing. She awoke screaming. Bayu held her tightly, whispering her name. But in her ears, the drumbeat grew louder. Not from the jungle, not from the sky, from inside her, her rib cage, her bones, her blood. The rhythm was no longer knocking at the door. It was playing from within. The jungle had stopped pretending. It no longer whispered. It called, by name, by blood, by rhythm. Artie knew the moment she woke that she wouldn't see another morning unless she went back. Not to the ruins, not to the altar, but beneath it all, to the chamber where the shaman's rhythm still echoed, incomplete, unfinished, waiting for the final note, waiting for her. Bayu found her at the river, washing her hands again and again. The skin at her knuckles was raw. "You're leaving," he said. She didn't answer. The silence between them had become more honest than words. "You think offering yourself will stop it?" "Not just offering, replacing." Bayu's brow furrowed. "Replacing what?" She turned to him, eyes hollow but steady. "The source." "You mean the shaman?" She nodded. His rhythm didn't need his body. It needed a host. That's how he survived, through each person it claimed, through Arya, through Mei Lin, through me. "So if you offer yourself, I can take the rhythm with me, seal it again, end it." Bayu's voice cracked. "And what happens to you?" Artie smiled, not gently. "I dance." They prepared in silence. Bayu set the circle once more. Salt, thread, silver, the same symbols Kartika's people had used 100 years ago, but reversed, rewritten, recharged. This wasn't a ritual of invitation. It was one of containment, of sacrifice, of sealing. Mei Lin, still weak, sat outside the circle, her eyes clearer now, but rimmed with memory too thick to forget. She spoke softly. "I saw you, in the veil." "I know," Artie whispered. "She touched your face, and she said, 'You were brave and foolish.'" Artie laughed. It sounded like someone else. "That's fair." Night fell hard, not like a curtain, more like a collapse, like the sky had given up on pretending to protect them. Bayu lit the final candle. Mei Lin handed Artie a small black stone etched with a single character, End. She closed her hand around it, then stepped into the circle and began to dance. This time, there was no costume, no headdress, no veil, only her bare skin, her broken rhythm, and her will. The rhythm started in her feet, spread to her spine, crawled up her ribs and down her arms, until even her breath came in beats. 3 inhales, pause, 2 exhales. The shaman's pattern. But she didn't fight it. She embraced it. And then she turned it, bent it, folded it into her own. 2 steps, pause, 3 turns, reversed. The drum began to play, not from the outside, but from within her. It beat through her chest, her skull, her stomach, and with each beat, she felt herself vanish. She saw him, Roxa, the shaman. But now he wore her face. He stood at the edge of the circle, grinning, arms open. You finally understand. This rhythm isn't a curse. It's a continuation. It outlives. It outlasts. It outdances. Artie's limbs jerked. The beat grew stronger, but she didn't stop. "No," she said. "It ends now." He tilted his head. "You cannot destroy a rhythm, but I can drown it." She took the stone-marked end from her pocket, placed it against her chest, and struck it, once, twice, 3 times. The sound wasn't loud, but it was final. The circle ignited. Salt caught fire. The cymbals bled light. And Artie screamed, not in pain, but in release. The rhythm inside her fractured, shattered, broke into echoes that had nowhere left to go. The shaman howled. His mask fell away, revealing a hollow void, no face, no eyes, just an endless mouth filled with drums. He reached for her, and she stepped into him. 1 step, 2, 3. She placed her hand on his chest and whispered, "This is my offering." The fire swallowed them both. The jungle screamed, the wind fled, the pavilion cracked, and then silence. Real silence, not absence. Peace. At dawn, Bayou stood at the edge of the circle, Meilin beside him. The ground was scorched, the air still. No sign of Artie, no drum, no voice, but the chimes on the house no longer rang. The rooster crowed, and the wind finally returned. There is no monument, no shrine, no stone to mark where she fell. Just scorched earth beneath a dying tree, and the faint scent of ash carried by the wind when no one's looking. They never found her body. They never expected to, because she had become the rhythm, and the rhythm had been buried again. The village moved on in the way all haunted places do, slowly, quietly, and with one ear always tilted toward the past. The wind chimes returned to their usual dissonance. The rooster feathers stayed whole. The babies no longer cried in patterns. And the forest, dense, ancient, unknowable, grew calm again. Bayou remained, not because he had to, but because someone needed to remember. He lived quietly in the teacher's house, tending the garden, keeping the mirrors clean, hanging fresh offerings from the trees, not out of fear, but out of respect. He stopped recording sound, stopped writing music, but every night he lit a single candle and whispered her name, Artie. Meilin left. She traveled far, became a documentarian in name only. Her footage from Tanjung Merah was never released. She tried several times, but the hard drives would always glitch. The audio would distort. The footage would blur. And when she tried to upload it, she'd hear a low thump through her speakers. 3 beats. Pause. 2. So she stopped trying. Instead, she wrote a single-page treatment, untitled, 1 paragraph. She submitted it to a folklore archive anonymously. There is a rhythm older than grief, deeper than silence, and more patient than death. It waits not to be heard, but to be remembered. Years passed. Tourists came to Tanjung Merah occasionally, drawn by rumors, by stories, by the mystery of the vanished bride and the forbidden drum. They saw the ruins, they filmed the tree, they posted videos with thumbnails that said things like, "We spent the night in a haunted Javanese village and this happened." Nothing ever did. Not anymore. Not for them. Because the rhythm didn't belong to outsiders. It belonged to blood. One such tourist, a graduate student from Jakarta, arrived just before dusk. She wandered the old temple, asked no one for permission, lit a candle on the cracked altar, and found something strange behind a loose panel. A camera battery, half buried, still intact. She turned it over in her hand, curious, and as the sun slipped below the tree line, she heard it, faint, from deep in the forest. Not footsteps, not drums, not wind. A bell. Just one. A single silver bell. Ringing. Some say it was the wind, some say it was nothing. But those who still live in the village know better, because when the night is quiet, when the jungle is still, when the moon hides behind cloud and shadow, they sometimes hear it. A rhythm. Not loud, not demanding, but certain. Endless. 3. Pause. 2. It doesn't come from the trees, or the sky, or the graves. It comes from within, from the blood, from the bone, from the echo that once was Arti, from the rhythm she sealed by becoming its final note. They say if you listen too closely, if you tap your fingers too often, or dream in counts, or walk in patterns, you might start to feel it again. The rhythm. Calling. Not to frighten, not to curse, but to remind you. Some music never fades. Some offerings never die. And some drums still echo.